Okay, imagine this. What if you had everything you could possibly dream of? We're talking unlimited wealth, absolute power, endless pleasure, and you just chose to walk away from it all. This isn't some hypothetical question. It's the true story of Prince Siddhartha Gautama, and his decision, what we call the Great Renunciation, didn't just change his own life, it sparked an entire global religion.
So that's the big question, isn't it? It's a puzzle that has fascinated people for thousands of years. And to even get close to an answer, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning, to a strange prophecy that was made the moment he was born, one that basically put his entire life on a collision course with destiny.
You see, right from the get-go, Siddhartha's life was a tug-of-war between two massive, completely opposite destinies. It was a truly impossible choice, and the crazy part is, it wasn't even his to make at first.
So, at his birth, Brahmin priests took one look and saw the signs. This kid, they said, was going to be one of two things. Either a world ruler, a king with more power and wealth than anyone had ever seen, or a world teacher, a Buddha, who would show all of humanity the path to freedom from suffering. Well, his father, King Shuddhodana, heard this, and he was determined to force that first option. There was no way he was going to lose his son and heir to some spiritual quest.
The king's plan was pretty simple, really. He decided to fight destiny with pleasure. The idea was to build a world so perfect, so incredibly luxurious, that his son would never even think to look beyond the palace walls. It was, quite literally, a gilded cage, designed to keep reality out.
And the scale of this whole operation was just staggering. Siddhartha didn't have one palace. He had three, one for each season, each one filled with every pleasure imaginable. He was constantly surrounded by attendants whose only job was to keep him distracted and entertained. But the number one rule, the most important one, was simple and kind of impossible. He must never see old age, sickness, or death. And believe it or not, for 29 years, the plan actually worked. Siddhartha lived in this perfect little bubble, totally unaware of some of life's most basic truths.
But, you can't shield someone from reality forever. When he was 29, the prince finally took a few trips outside the palace walls. And, well, that perfect world his father had so carefully constructed came crashing down.
On these journeys, he saw four things that just completely shattered his perception of reality. First, he saw an old man, and it hit him. People get old. Then he saw a sick person, and he realized people get diseases. And then, the biggest shock of all, he saw a corpse, and he was confronted with the finality of death. He learned that these things happen to everyone, and one day they would happen to him. But then he saw a fourth sight, a calm, wandering ascetic, a holy man who'd given up everything, who somehow seemed at peace with all this. And that planted a seed. Maybe there was a way out.
The impact was just profound. All the luxuries back in the palace suddenly didn't feel like pleasures anymore. They felt like a lie. The music, the amazing food, the comfort, it all seemed completely meaningless when faced with the suffering he now knew was waiting for everyone.
He just couldn't unsee what he had seen. That clash in his mind between his perfect, sheltered life and the harsh reality of suffering, it was just too much to handle. For him, the only way forward was to leave it all behind and find the answer himself. And that decision led to one of the most dramatic exits in history.
The final push came one night. He was looking at his sleeping attendants, and instead of beauty, he saw them in these unflattering poses, drooling or snoring. And in that moment, he saw the decaying, impermanent nature of all human bodies. As the old text says, the palace felt like a cemetery. It wasn't a home anymore, it had become a tomb.
So he left, and his departure was this series of deeply symbolic acts. At midnight, he snuck out of the palace. At a river, he cut off his long hair, the very symbol of his royal status. He traded his fancy silk clothes for a simple robe, and sent his servant and his horse back home, cutting his last tie to the world he once knew. As the sun came up, Prince Siddhartha was gone. The ascetic Gautama had been born. Now, Siddhartha's personal journey was really just getting started, but the story of that journey, well, it was about to take on a life of its own. Its power was so universal that it would soon cross cultures and even religions in a way that very, very few stories ever do.
At the very heart of his decision is this feeling called samvega. It's not just being curious, it's a deep spiritual existential shock. It's that urgent gut-punch realization that life is temporary and full of struggle, and it lights this fire in you to find a solution. That feeling is what made his quest absolutely unstoppable.
And that feeling, that story of making such a radical choice, was so compelling that it didn't just stay inside Buddhism. It got picked up, retold, and transformed as it traveled along the Silk Road.
Okay, this is where the story takes a truly incredible turn. In medieval Christianity, one of the most popular legends was about two saints, Barlaam and Josaphat. The story is about an Indian prince, Josaphat, who's sheltered by his father to avoid a prophecy, who then encounters death and suffering, gives up his throne, and becomes a Christian holy man. The parallels are just undeniable, because it is the Buddhist story. Siddhartha, under a different name, had accidentally become a Christian saint.
And the story's journey didn't stop there. In the 19th century, a poem called The Light of Asia brought the original tale to millions in the West. It captivated huge literary figures like Borges and even Leo Tolstoy. In fact, Tolstoy was so moved by the Christian version of the prince's tale that he did his own dramatic renunciation late in his life, leaving behind his wealth and family to search for spiritual truth.
When you get right down to it, the story of the Great Renunciation is still so powerful because it speaks to a choice we all face, in ways both big and small. It's the ultimate story about choosing a life of meaning over a life of comfort, about sacrificing everything you know for the chance to discover a profound, unknown truth. And that really leaves us with a final question to think about for ourselves. The prince was moved by the truth of suffering. So what truth, what realization, if you saw it clearly enough, would be powerful enough to make you change your own life completely?